morning, Unity of Bellingham. How are you? Okay, I'm Shari Humes. Oh, hi. Oh, man, I feel it. Okay, so I'm Shari Humes. I'm your platform assistant today, so I want to welcome you all. And today we have a guest speaker. This is going to be an amazing ride this morning, I guarantee you. And Kimberly Braun is our guest speaker. Emergence, the role of understanding and awakening. She'll have a class afterwards with a signed book. And her book that she'll be covering today is The Naked Light. This is my book, so you can't have this one. Anyway, just joking with you. So we're in for a really good time with that. So we thank Kimberly for being here. And let's see, music ministry is Kate and Cheryl. And we say thank you. Yeah.
Let go of the shore and let the water carry you. Let go of the shore, float into the mystery. Let go of the shore and let the water carry you. Let go of the shore, float into the mystery. You have all you need, it's all inside of you. Just close your eyes and breathe and know that you are safe. Let go of the shore and let the water carry you. Let go of the shore, float into mystery. No need to make a plan, your heart will be your compass. Just lift your sails in faith and trust you will arrive. Let go of the shore and let the water carry you. Let go of the shore, float into the mystery. Float into the mystery. Float into the mystery.
And if you're inclined, I invite you to close your eyes. Part of letting go is closing our physical eyes so that we open the inner eye to experience reality unmitigated, to drop into the essence of our being. And if you're inclined, bring your focus to the center of your chest, the heart chakra. And feel, sense, or imagine the beating of your own heart. Bum, bum. Bum, bum. Become aware of this heartbeat being a pulse of light, and allow the light that is pulsing to fill your entire physical body. Allow this light to extend beyond your body and fill this space, touching all present. And awaken to this divine pulse of your being, moving beyond these walls out to touch all creation. The divine pulse of your being, touching and being touched by the divine pulse of all creation. To move us even more deeply into the history of our own being, allow this chant to aid you in letting go so that you can be fully here.
is a beautiful song by Marty Balin of Jefferson Airplane. Summer inhaled and held its breath too long. The winter looked the same as if it never had gone. And through an open window where no curtain hung, I saw you coming back to me. One begins to read between the pages of a look, the shape of sleepy music, and suddenly you're hooked. And suddenly, like the rain upon the trees, the kisses on the run. I saw you I saw you coming back to me. You came to stay and live my way, scatter my love like leaves on the wind. You always say you won't go away, but I know this always has been. It always has been. A transparent dream beneath an occasional sigh. And most of the time, I just let it go by. But now I wish it hadn't begun. I saw you coming back to me. You know, small things like reasons are put in a jar. Whatever happened to wishes that were wished upon a star? Was that just something we made up for fun? I saw you I saw you I saw you coming back to me.
Not yet. Now you can. Good, good. So lovely, Frank. Thank you for saying yes to my being here. So the title of this message is Emergence, the role of understanding in our awakening process. And I think what's very compelling and delicious about that title is the word understanding, because in order to grasp our awakening process, oftentimes, and I would say almost all of the time, our ways of understanding have to fall away, because our minds attempt to set up structures that can only take us so far. And yet, when we let go in that way, we gain what I would call a nonverbal grasp of reality. That then our minds are taken into the process. Our minds are the fruit of the enjoyment of the understanding. And I'm going to bring that in much more of an implicit way versus an explicit way. But I wanted to set that up for you. So as I was preparing yesterday morning, I was sitting out, I love Bellingham. I've only been here once before. And I was down near the water. And as I was sitting there just in the silence, letting myself be prepared for our time together, there was a movie that came up in my heart that surprised me. Who has either read the book or seen the movie called The Notebook? Right? It's like this popular movie, and the author is known for his fiction writings. And what I was struck by was this instance that happened only a couple times in the movie. That when this older couple, so the wife is suffering from a form of Alzheimer's or dementia, and the husband reads to her every day. And every day he's reading to her, he's reading the story of their life. And very often when she's listening to this story, she doesn't know it's them. But then there are these moments of tenderness when her eyes light up and that's us, isn't it? And she's met with this joy of him and her remembering who they are, remembering the tenderness of their love, remembering the amazing life that they've had together. And it struck me that that is a great image and example of this process of awakening that leads to emergence. The dropping into the remembering and the agency that there is a divine source that's reading our story to us, moment after moment, relishing every twist, every turn, every celebration, every despair, and in it, in the remembering of the story as it's being read within us, we awaken. Such a great example, isn't it? So there are so many ways that we could enter into talking about this process. And I decided it would be fun to lay out to you a concept that was written by and developed by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I know that you filmed the PBS documentary. Raise your hand if you know this individual. Some do and some don't. So afterwards, you can get to know him. I didn't want to spend all of our time talking about his life. But he was born, I'll give you just a little bit of a setup. He was born in 1881, lived to 1955. He was a Jesuit priest and a biopaleontologist. In fact, some of the archaeological digs that he went on were during the very time that they were discovering the skulls of bipedal hominids. In 1924 is the first record of that. And it was during that time, 1924 to 1927, and this I think will endear him to you, he was silenced because his experience of the divine led him to write a new understanding around the idea of original sin. He came to the conclusion, because of his experiences, that there couldn't be original sin the way it was being taught. And what did this come from? His openness to spirit and the use of his mind as a biopaleontologist and the use of his inquiry as a theologian. So early on in his career and ministry, he was silenced. And about 15 years after that, he comes out with a seminal work called The Phenomena of Man, which was banned. The ban was only lifted shortly after he died in 1955. It was still considered heretical. You can see writings in 1962, where they're like, don't look at this. It may not be banned, but it is dangerous. And it wasn't until about 1995 that his works began to gain some traction and credibility. And in his very pioneering exploration of what we are as a human being and what this life is about, he developed something called cosmogenesis. And he said that the actual ground of existence, the unifying principle of existence, isn't matter, it isn't energy, it is spirit. That the ground, the structure of unity as we know it in the flesh, is spirit. And that it is something that's called a radial energy. A radial energy is like, if you look at me and you imagine you're seeing a swirling of spirit at my very center, there's a radial energy that's vibrating and moving outward and outward that ends up being the physical expression that you see of me and anything beyond that. And that we as human beings, as individuals, are waking up to that. And that once we wake up fully, we will become a singular consciousness. And he goes so far, which probably even adds to his heresy today, to say that once we come into that singular consciousness, we won't even be human as we know it. Eye has not seen. We will emerge into an expression of the divine where we've penetrated the paradox of the you and the you and the you and the you and the you, and they will coexist. Well, in this whole theology that he was writing about, he identified that there are three ways that we experience God, and God in the broadest sense. So let yourself use that word in a way that makes sense to you. I'm not narrowing it down to one limited concept. That there are three ways that our whole lives are unfolding. He calls them three faces of God. So in order to share with you these three faces, because this will be a little bit of your takeaway and an easy application within your own life, I want to share a story from my life, from when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up there till I was 11. And similar to the beautiful autumn shift that happens here, the autumn in the Midwest is just magnificent. I mean, at least back then, the climate I know has changed. Back then, when summer was ending and autumn set in, it was remarkable. As the leaves were beginning to turn, in just about a day or a week, you could feel the entire shift in the air. The drop in the temperature, the wind would begin to pick up just a little bit. And for me, as a young geek, because I loved school, autumn was my favorite. And back then we walked to and from school. I don't even know that my mom or dad saw me off in the morning. Like that's how independent our life was there in Cincinnati. We'd have our little cigar boxes with our new scissors and the glue and everything. And I would walk to and from school. And one of these days I was walking home from school, and it was particularly autumn wind. It was just picking up. And unsolicited, I began to experience all of nature like a song and a dance. Everything came alive. And as it came alive, I found that the only response that naturally came forward was to join the dance, which is what kids do, right? When there's something really fun happening, they usually just join in. So I began, unfamiliar with the dervish movement, whirling my way home down the street. And I got to the end of our cul-de-sac, because we were right on the edge of the cul-de-sac. And again, I'm giving words to what was timeless. I stopped. I had lost myself. I had lost any self-reflection. But then as I stopped, I dropped back into self-reflection. And I remember this big exhale and looking out at this brilliance before me, just taking it all in and savoring the joy and the bliss that I could taste on my tongue and in my body. And within that moment, a tree across the cul-de-sac seemed to light up even more and pull my gaze. And as it pulled my gaze, of course, I naturally was compliant. And then one leaf on that tree pulled my gaze even more intimately. So I dropped in with the leaf, and the leaf was there, and it was this beautiful kind of orangish yellow color, and it was going like this on its branch, and I was just like this. And then all of a sudden, the leaf dropped off the branch and began going like this, descending to the ground. And unsolicited in that moment, from somewhere deep within me that I didn't even know was there, this existential grief bubbled up. And if I'm going to put words to it, it came from deep within. It's like, is that it? Is that all life is about, moving towards death? Because it felt like the leaf was dying. It had broken away from its life source. And the beloved, which is my word for the divine, the beloved in that moment didn't want me to suffer. And as that arose and filled me with sadness, time seemed to stop and these veils got pulled back. And it was like I was just like plunged into something. It felt like a forward movement into something. And there was the immediate knowing that the leaf was in God and God was in the leaf. And without a bridge of my mind getting into thinking mode, there was the awareness that that's what my life is about. That's what all life is about, is this being and becoming in God. And with that awakening moment, I was washed of that grief, 100%. That was 53 years ago, and it's nowhere to be found in my psyche and in my emotional body and within me. What replaced it was this bubbling joy and the knowing that that's the adventure. It brought meaning and purpose, direction, and solid ground on which to stand. And I believe that story today gives evidence of Chardin's 3 faces of God. So I want to tell you the story first so that you could relate to these 3 faces, because they actually are caught up in that story. So I go back and forth between Pierre and Teilhard and de Chardin. So if I jump around, that's his full name. So the first face of God, it is the it space. The it space is transpersonal. It's non-theistic. It is the sense of God that is the live and move and have our being in without quite any other understanding other than that. It is when we experience nature in such a way that we feel a wordless beauty of God within us and outside of us. Raise your hand if you've ever had experiences like that. Probably all of us. Those are the easier ones to have, right? Because it's nature, and nature is so beautiful just to look out upon, no matter what it's doing. So it's easy for it to evoke that face, to be a messenger of that face, to be an entry point to that experience of the God source. The second one, the second face of God, as Teilhard says it, is the we space. This is the intersubjective. It's theistic. It's personal. It's what we might call the Christ consciousness, the self knowing the self. It is a relational, vibrant field where there's some mysterious dance of the divine and human energy taking place. Raise your hand if you have any form of relationship in your life. Right? I didn't see every hand raised. This face of God is, like the first one, an essential part of our nature as a human being. And I think as well, it's one of the trickier ones. It is where we find the need for healing around the limitations of our religious structures. Right? I've had the blessing of traveling for about 24 years and unexpectedly being at the service of the healing for many individuals who felt that their experience within their own religious structures squashed their spirit instead of set them free, encouraging a belief that was not liberating. Because that face of God is so essential to our nature as human beings, the relational quality, the I, thou. And we don't really get away from it. For even within religious structures, how often the poems of people like Rumi and Mirabai and Hafiz from a completely other tradition resonate with our hearts, touch us, evoke something that we could say, there's truth there for me. I can feel that. And we get to experience it outside a structure that is still working out its wounded nature. Evidence of the we face and an invitation to orient ourselves with our understanding to say, that means then, or could it mean, don't take anything I say as true. I meant to start with that. I'll say it now. I'm the occasion for you to experience what's true for you. Could that mean then that every single relationship in my life, including the one with myself, is an occasion for the experience of the divine? And if that's true, how can that be true? How can I be more available for that experience that brings into divine order the flow of my life? So we've got the it space and the we space, and then we've got the third. That is the I space. And interestingly, if you were to look at his writings, he says that this I space, this face of God, is both subjective and transcendent. The mind, oftentimes when we think of transcendent, means it's outside of me or above me or beyond me. And yet Teilhard so brilliantly points out that this experience of transcendence as the I space is completely subjective in the most liberating way. How so? Because we drop into the reality of us as God. We realize ourselves as the light of the world, and not as something that we say, I am the light of the world, because that would be self-reflective, even beyond that, even more intimate than that. We experience the resting in ourselves as this divine source, free of any limitations, fully confident and audacious. If we look at any writings of anyone that we might call a mystic, or someone that is holy or has come to a certain point of awakening or enlightenment, I shy away from those categories, but if we were to read the writings of anyone that seems to, through their words and the history of their existence, give evidence of that, we always find that there is an incredible audacity. John of the Cross, a Carmelite like I was, came to the realization that the soul center is God in the 1500s. He died before they could burn him or kill him. But where does this then take us? I want to share with you a final story to situate the possibility of these three entry points being trustworthy. Because what can come up when we reflect upon that, because that does catch up pretty much our reality as we know it. The it, the we, and the I. The it, the we, and the I, in its many forms. There's always the question of, what about the parts of me that feel dark? What about the parts of me or the world that suffer? What about these parts that don't seem to be giving a face of God? It's a perennial question that goes back to the earliest writings of humanity, where they used so many myths to help explain these things. How then does the metal hit the road when it comes to those parts of ourselves and our humanity? And I want to share with you a story that has suffering in it, but it's in a bit more of a playful way. So it can be a story you can take with you. And it's from when I was living in the monastery. So I was a Carmelite monastic for 10 and a half years, which means that we largely lived in silence, and most of the sound that was part of our lives was chant, prayer, and nature. So you can imagine being worked over on a cellular level in that rhythm, again and again and again, with a singular focus on the presence of the divine. Very, very powerful. So in monastic life, there are lots of different duties, and some change every week, and some change once a month, and some never change. Like when I was in North Dakota for 4.5 years, I took the compost out every day, even in the dead of winter on cross-country skis. So that was my duty that was there for 4.5 years. But I want to use a story from a duty that changed every week. And it was a very simple duty. It is that every time we went into the chapel to meditate or chant or pray, you turn on the sanctuary lights. And every time you leave the chapel, you turn the lights off. See, we portioned things out so nothing would be overwhelming. We all had little tasks like that. So I had, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I had just had one of these really juicy moments in my meditation. And there was this urging within me. It's like, take me to the next level. I'm ready. Have you ever done that and then not known at all what you just did? And the shit hits the fan and everything falls apart. Yes. And that's what happened. And in my life, it showed up in a number of ways. One of the ways was that we didn't have much technology, but anything that did have any sort of mechanism in it mechanically and all went haywire. That was one of the things that kept happening in my life. And what happened during this time of this take me to the next level is I got the duty of the sanctuary light. And we went in, we would get up at midnight, we would get up at 5:30, we were back in the chapel at 8:30, at 11, at 1, at 4:30 for another hour and a half, and again at 8:30. So it was a powerful in and out of the chapel, beautiful rhythm. And the morning I had that duty, I walk in and I turn on the light, and we're all there, and we're there for probably about 3 hours at that time. And when we went to left, we processed 2 by 2, which would happen whenever we were eating. So whenever we were going to go where we ate, we would chant a psalm and process 2 by 2. So we finished our time of meditation, we would kiss the floor, we would get back up, and then we're processing out. And we left through the door, and I forgot to turn the tabernacle light off. I know, right? It's alarming. Well, I was in formation, which means I was in spiritual boot camp, if monastic life isn't even a boot camp already. Nobody turned the light off for me. So about a half hour later or 45 minutes later, I get buzzed to the leader's office. And the buzz goes through the whole monastery. So everybody gets a little Morse code. Mine was the full house. And that buzz went through the monastery. And I was like, well, now I wonder what happened. Nobody ever buzzes me. So I went to the prioress's office. And she said, you forgot to turn the tabernacle light off. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I went and turned it off. We gather again for prayer. And I turn the light on. And we go to leave, this time not processing, and we leave through the door, and I forgot the tabernacle light again. And I get buzzed to the office. And then I go down and I turn the light off. And we gather again, this time for a midday meditation, and we go to leave, and I get distracted, and I don't turn the light off again. And this happened the entire day. And every time, nobody just turns it off for me. They buzz me, and then I acknowledge it, and then I go back down and I turn the light off. And it happened every day that week, every single time we got together. That's 8 times a day for 7 days. Yes, well, I'm this young Carmelite nun and zealous. I'm like, oh, there's a divine lesson here. I wonder what my lesson is. So I end that week of failure. I'm like, I'm just called to be more present. That was the obvious lesson, right? So I'm like, okay, next time I get that duty, I am going to be more present. It's going to be the way I'm present. And it comes back around, I don't know how long, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I get that duty again, and I make the commitment to God. And what do you think happens? Yes. Every time we gather, every day of that entire week, I forget the tabernacle light. Right? And so then I end that week, okay, well, that's not my lesson. What's my lesson? As you know, we're very cause and effect. There's got to be a lesson here. And as soon as I get the lesson, I won't fail anymore, right? The misconception we can have. So I start getting ingenious. I love to sing. So I start making up little, like, the light and the sanctuary light. I make up these little, jingles that are going to help me remember the light the next time around. And what do you think happens when I get the duty again 3 weeks later? I forget the song and I forget the light. So I'm like, okay, I got this. You know what it's like when you're zealous and then you start to wane in your confidence a little bit, like, oh, okay. And it's a public affair because nobody turns the light off for you. So you're getting buzzed the whole time. I could be out gardening and it comes over the loudspeaker out into the garden where I'm being reminded of my failure again. So the duty comes around again, and this time it's like, okay, well, everyone knows. So I took a big piece of yellow construction paper and put the word light on it. And on my stall, we have about 13 different chant books, but right on the stall there, I'm like, there's my yellow piece of paper. I'm not going to forget this light this time. Because I went through everything. I need courage. I need detachment. I need this. I was trying to figure it out. What's my lesson? I would carry this paper out, and what would happen? I'd like put the paper down like this, right? And forget the light. So this went on for a while. And it kind of became, we would get together once a day to have recreation where we would enjoy being together and talking. And it became a bit of a joke in the community too. So added to my waning confidence of not being able to learn my lesson and not be a failure, I also became a joke. and and we're largely living in silence. So whatever happens at recreation, you take with you in the silence. So I am at some point, it's probably 6 months into this consistent failure, I am kneeling there for my time of private meditation, because we kept vigil as in addition to all of our prayer and times together, just to hold a steady presence for the world. And I was there in this private time, and for the first time, I started to really feel discouraged. And I didn't try to do away with what I was feeling. Because discouragement in my mind felt like a lack of trust or a lack of faith or what's wrong with me or am I not more holy or wherever we can go with uncomfortable emotions when we're really having some suffering around something. And as I felt discouraged, I just let myself go there. I was done. I was worn out with trying to be so diligent in learning my lesson. And so I just let myself go there in my discouragement. And it felt energetically like I was just falling in an abyss. I was falling. And amidst that, I had this inspiration to open up randomly the Bible. And so I did that. I opened up and I just plopped it open. And I opened up to this passage that just jumped off the page at me. And it was a passage, if you know anything about some of these stories, where Jesus is walking on water. And his friends are in a boat. And they see him in the distance. They don't know it's him at first. And then they see him. And then one of his friends, Peter, says, "If it's you, call me to you. I want to walk on the water as well." And Peter gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. And then what happens is he notices the wind around him and he notices the movement of the sea and he starts to fall. He starts to fall. He's sinking down in the water. And in that moment, that image of him sinking in the water was my sense, myself falling downward. And as that was happening energetically, falling downward, the next phrase lit up and I experienced it fully in the moment. The phrase says, Jesus reached out immediately and grabbed him. And as I was descending down through my discouragement, I had this experience. It was like massive angel wings wrapped themselves around me as I was falling in my discouragement. And as they wrapped themselves around me, I experienced. There isn't anything I could do right or do wrong, be or not be, know or not know, that is not already held in the embrace of the divine. There's no part within any part of ourselves that is not where the infinite already is. There is no thought that can come through our minds, as unpleasant as that thought can be, that is not where the infinite already is. There is no hidden place in our being that we're afraid to even know is there, that the infinite is not already there. We are already held, already touched, already illumined. We are already all we are meant to be. And in that understanding, we remember who we are. Think about, since many of you saw the movie, that moment, one of the moments, any of the moments, where her eyes get wide and she's like, oh, that's us. And what do? They get closer, right? She starts to cry, he starts to cry. He can speak to her and know he's heard and seen. She can speak to him, and they are in that intimacy. They have just simply done what? Remembered. They have remembered. And bringing it full circle, in later years when I was going through various healings and transformations, at one moment I was energetically taken back to that leaf experience. And a new layer of it came forward that wasn't in my knowing when I was 5 or 6. I had lost my grandma when I was 3, and we were really, really close. And when I was 4, I almost lost my mom. There was something in the very nervous system. There was something in the unconscious of my own being that had already begun to accept an untruth at the age of 5 that could come forward to be washed in that leaf experience. The faces of God. Letting our minds ask new questions around anything in our lives that is a setup for the it space, the we space, or the I space. Turn the moment into a very sacrament. I'm not Catholic anymore, but I can say that there are elements of that mystical theology of the Christ experience that are so universal. And one of them is the sacrament of the moment. I want to end this message with a poem that comes from that leaf experience. And actually this poem, I can't remember when I wrote it, but it wasn't when I was 5. But showing the timelessness of our journeys, right? How overlaid the past, present, and future, past, future, present, how much it is all present. There was this kiss I had when I was 5. It sucked my lips off, took them into etheric realms, where they spoke the word of God. The words blew up leaves. They inebriated the caterpillar. All creation heard the exultant phrases, heard the sound that blew like a lover's whisper into the fiber of every particle. There was a wedding dance then, and I cried. For the branches on my street lit themselves up as the candles of our union. May our emergence be the coming home of the remembering and the ever new expression of God as you and me.